This is an AMI podcast.
I had a degree in drama, I explained. We talked, meaning she talked, about playwrights she liked. It was between me and another girl for the job, and she needed to know what I had to offer the tiny pretentious theater company because we like to think of ourselves as the most exciting theater company in Chicago. I tried to joke, I like to think of myself as the most beautiful woman in the world, but where will that get either of us really? The other girl got the job. This is AMI Audio Book Review on AMI Audio. Thanks for joining me. I'm Ramya Amuddin here with Nisreen Abdelmajid. And what you heard was a very funny quote. I picked it myself from Bossy Pants by Tina Fey. And this is an absolute hilarious book. You know, it's one of these books that I've been reading this for months now. And not because it's bad, but because it's the book that I kind of go in rotation with amongst a whole bunch of other books. So, you know, some books you binge, you finish, and they're done. And then other books you're like, hey, I'm in the mood for a laugh. Let's go listen to a bit more of the Tina Fey. And she is hysterical. Like, I don't know how much of a fan you are of either her or just stand-up comedy and comedians in general, but her memoir in Bossy Pants, because it's technically a memoir, but, you know, you're just laughing so hard. You're like, what the heck? Is this even real? She does such a good job at it, and she narrates her own book. So it's phenomenal. She does an amazing job. I highly recommend it.
I love that because I've wanted to ask you for a recommendation this week, and this is perfect. And yeah, I heard she's hilarious, so even better. I am done with Till Death Do Us Part by Amanda. I just didn't want to go further because it got too much. It was just a very evil book that I was not about, and I can't describe it to you guys because it's crazy. It got crazier every chapter. And I'm like, is this going to get better at some point? Do these people have good luck? No, it just gets worse. So I'm done with that book. I put that book on the side. And yeah, I'm going to try your recommendation this time. So we're going to go for it.
Yeah, just flip it completely and just go to something funny, right? It's just so funny. No, I totally agree with you. The book did not get any better. I mean, there was a bit of a wrap-up ending, you know, no spoilers this time around, people. But there was a kind of a nice bow tie ending at the, you know, very, very end. But until the absolute end, it's just like, whoa, does anybody's luck turn around here? And I don't think it was meant to. No.
Yeah. No, it just keeps getting worse. And I hope it does turn around at the end. I'm not going to read about it
to find
even
out
further.
Will you Google it?
You know what? I will.
Do you do that?
I will,
yeah?
Because I'm curious. Okay. I do that for some books that I don't want to read, and I'm like, I'm just curious about how it will end, though.
Yeah, totally.
And even movies too.
Like, even if it's been years since I left a book on hold and I keep telling myself I'm going to go back, but, you know, probably I won't, I still will never Google it. I don't want to talk about it. I won't even tell people that I'm in the middle of reading it just in case of spoilers. Yeah, I have a serious issue with that. But you know, you're different. You'll go find out.
Yeah.
All right.
Try different things.
Exactly. Well, let's have a glance at the Selah homepage for our three features at the very top, starting with Probably Ruby. Now, this list, I will say, is the same one from their past episodes this month. So again, Probably Ruby by Lisa Burt Wilson, and this is an Indigenous peoples fiction. The second book is Unreconciled by Jessie Wente, and this is an Indigenous peoples biography. And the last one for the featured title section is In My Own Moccasins by Helen Knott, Indigenous peoples biography. So these are the three featured titles. It's the first heading on the Selah homepage, CELA-library.ca. And after we check out the featured titles, which are the first heading on Selah, we can move on to another section on this homepage called Check It Out. And there's a bunch of categories under the Check It Out section on Selah. We're going to go through the new titles category. And again, there's so many categories under this category, if you will, but we'll go through some of the self-help books that were released within the last month because there's just a ton of ways for you to search. It's very, very flexible. But I'll tell you some titles, I think 5 over here. The Memo, What Women of Color Need to Know to Secure a Seat at the Table by Minda Harts. And this was released into 2019. Also, What Would Frida Do? A Guide to Living Boldly by Ariana Davis from 2020. Find Your F, Yeah, and that's spelled F asterisk CK, yeah. Stop Censoring Who You Are and Discover What You Really Want by Alexis Rockley in 2019. We have On Doing Nothing, Finding Inspiration in Idleness by Roman Muradov in 2018. And the last one we can check out here is Just When You're Comfortable in Your Own Skin, It Starts to Sag. And this is Rewriting the Rules of Midlife by Amy Nobile, Trisha Esworth from 2018. Awesome. That's what we're going to feature today from Sela. Again, go to selalibrary.ca for more books, more recommendations, more announcements from them. Lots and lots for you to check out. Now let's talk about what's trending. Nazreen, what do you have for us?
So on Twitter is what's trending on audiobooks.com. Trick or treat your ears to this week's hottest new releases. Get it? Trick or treat. I made that up on the spot. I think that was pretty clever considering, almost Halloween. Anyways,
Nice.
audiobooks.com tweeted out this week's top releases, starting off with State of Terror by Louis Penny, The Book of Magic by Alice Hoffman, Silverview by John Le Carre, The Apollo Murders by Chris Hadfield, The Party Crasher by Sophie Kinsella, Star Wars Visions, and 7. The title is called Everyone You Hate is Going to Die and Other Comforting Thoughts on Family, Friends, Sex, Love, and More Things That Ruin Your Life, written by Daniel Sloss. And I looked into this because I felt this title just intrigued me. I had to go further. So I'm like, everyone you hate is going to die. So I'm like, okay, I need to look further in this. So I looked at the description and it says, one of this generation's hottest and boldest young comedians presents a transgressive and hilarious analysis of all of our dysfunctional relationships and attempts to point us in the vague direction of sanity. Daniel Sloss's stand-up comedy engages, enrages, offends, unsettles, educates, comforts, and gets audiences roaring with laughter, all at the same time. So in his groundbreaking specials seen on Netflix and HBO, he has brilliantly tackled everything from male toxicity and friendship to love, romance, and marriage, and claims that his on-stage laser-like dissection of relationships has single-handedly caused more than 300 divorces and 120,000 breakups. So this reminded me of the first book that you were talking about at the beginning of the segment, that it does have some laughter to it, and I prefer a good comedic book.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, when you can take serious subject matters, emotional or uncomfortable or awkward situations and questions that are very difficult, like the one from the title, and then be able to spin it into something that we can laugh about, right? Because it's a defense mechanism that we... Exactly. It's a defense mechanism that we all use anyway to kind of laugh off things. So it's kind of using it as that to get people talking about stuff.
I feel like we can all relate to this book too. Like we've all been through toxic relationships, friendships, love, and breakups and complicated stuff in our lives.
Sure.
I think he talks about every vague direction.
You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review on AMI Audio. I'm Ramya Amuddin, the host of the show, weekly audiobook conversations with us. That is myself and Nisreen Abdelmajid. Niz, we love to glance over the Sela homepage in the beginning of the show. And we glanced over a few books from their homepage under the featured book section. And now it's my favorite time of the show where we get to hit pause or play on one of these listens. Yeah, it's really, really fun. So we're going to talk about In My Own Moccasins by Helen Knott, and this is an Indigenous people's biography. I'll tell you a little bit about the book's premise. Helen Knott, a highly accomplished Indigenous woman, seems to have it all, but in her memoir, she offers a different perspective. In My Own Moccasins is an unflinching account of addiction, intergenerational trauma, and the wounds brought on by sexual violence. It's also the story of sisterhood, the power of ceremony, the love of family, and the possibility of redemption. With gripping moments of withdrawal, times of spiritual awareness, and historical insights, going back to the signing of Treaty 8 by her great great grandfather, Chief Bigfoot, her journey exposes the legacy of colonialism while reclaiming her spirit. So, this is what the book's about. Nizreen, I'm going to ask you, based on this pretty short synopsis, would you hit pause or play on this novel?
I would hit play. I feel like this sounds very empowering and I would definitely be interested. I think this is a binge reading book to me.
And Ben, we're going to bring you into the conversation. Would you hit pause or play on In My Own Moccasins?
I would hit play in a second once you finish with the synopsis. Like hands down, I it just got me with the intergenerational trauma and how it seems like a real point of view. So for me, play.
Awesome. I myself agree with both of you. I would definitely hit play. I mean, I'm not sure whether to think that this book is short because the synopsis was pretty short, but the kind of stuff that's being tackled in the book, and especially because this is a real story. It's not just based on nonfiction. It is nonfiction. It's someone's memoir. It's their stories and their reflections. And I think that that's an incredible place to start with our education. We've been talking a lot about Indigenous peoples' histories and where to get our audiobooks in for informing ourselves. And this is a really good place to start. So the voice that we heard is our guest for this section of the show, where we love to check in with avid audiobook listeners. And we open up the space to review, discuss, recommend, browse, conceptualize, and reminisce on our audiobook experiences. So we're welcoming in Bernard Akuoko, and you work in advocacy and accessibility, but that's just an understatement. You do a lot, Ben. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with your audiobook listening habits. Would you consider yourself an avid audiobook listener?
I would say I am. So for myself, I'm a person who gradually has lost my vision. So at first, I used to read printed books just like everybody else. And I remember when I was kind of on the later stages of losing my vision, people would recommend audiobooks, and I'd be like, why am I gonna just listen to a book? That's not the same. That's not the same. That's not a real printed book. But I remember reading my first audiobook and it blew my mind. Just the creativity within your mind and the pictures that you paint while listening to that book. It's amazing. Such a good experience.
So you used to read print books then?
Yes, you got it.
Okay, so the experience that you're coming at from having read print books in the past to like converting to audiobook listening, we'll just use that word loosely. So that kind of experience I think is really fascinating because I feel like your experience shifts. Like you get a different level of taking in a story or a piece of writing when you're listening to it rather than reading it. Do you agree, or is that totally different from what you've went through?
I would say yes, I agree with you 100%. It is a different experience because I find when you're reading that audiobook, when you're reading from the printed perspective, it's almost where you're focusing on the words, right? You don't have an opportunity to really get lost in the book that you're reading. So I find when I have a really good audiobook, you're really getting that feeling of that character. If the character's in distress, if the character's very happy, if the character's about to go into a room and something's about to pop up, you really gain what they're going through when you're listening to the audiobook and you're part of that ambiance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, not that all books have to be as dramatized or, where the characters have such significance voice acting put into them or anything like that. But it does, like you're alluding to, it helps you create that picture in your mind. And I'm finding more and more that there's this lean towards audiobooks feeling like audio dramas because the performances and the productions are getting so incredible.
Definitely agree. And even with that said, like when you're listening to an audiobook, you want to distinguish the characters, right? So I find when that narrator doesn't have that like true performance, it's just like that character sounded the same as that character. Or
Right.
like you have angry old man, and angry old man sounds just like a regular man. So it really emphasizes on the book feeling and the atmosphere of the book when you do have a good voice actor. You could even tell like when people are narrating, you could tell that they're enjoying doing it. Just
Oh,
how
yeah.
they put themselves in that book, you know?
Especially with the amount of social media coverage that audiobooks are getting right now. I mean, it just makes me super proud as like a consumer of audiobooks to see the kind of traction and conversations that are built up all over Twitter especially, and narrators are getting in on that and they're like, "Oh my gosh, my latest project, you guys can't wait to hear it." And just like hyping up the not just the projects, but like you're saying, their level of passion for recording audiobooks. And it's really great. I want to ask you, do you have any memories or any significant moments that you remember when you think back to audiobook listening, maybe way in the beginning when you were just getting into it, or like a go-to book that you listen to because it hits you, you know, in that right spot when you hear it? Anything like that for you?
No, absolutely, absolutely. So I still remember, and when you asked that question, first thought that came to my mind was my brother was actually running a race in Toronto. So I ended up going with him. I was like, I'll meet you at the starting line. I'll hold your stuff. And when I say he's running a race, this is a full marathon. This is going to be him running for like 4 hours. So me waiting around in Toronto, just waiting for him to finish a race and meeting him at the finishing line. So I remember, I can't remember exactly what audiobook it was, but I remember going to a Starbucks cafe and just putting in my earphones, like getting a drink from Starbucks, putting in my earphones and just listening to this audiobook in the middle of Starbucks while waiting for my brother. And it was so funny because I remember before like the race started and we are heading to Toronto, me so excited to just like, okay, I got this time and I really have nothing to do or nowhere to go. And I
Oh,
have
yeah.
this really great audiobook to enjoy. And so it just passed the time. I was like in good spirits. I was all hyped up when he came to the finishing line. And I was like, I just got to kill two birds with one stone. So it was just that cool, like cool ambiance of just like with my Starbucks audiobook, no care in the world. So it just gave me this like cool little euphoric moment. And I still think back to that when you ask that question.
No, and it's incredible that you would mention a story like this because you've not necessarily put aside some time, but you had some time that you could say you utilize just to get into audiobooks, right? And you know, nowadays people talk about yeah, I can listen to audiobooks while driving and I can listen while I'm working out and cleaning the house or taking my dog on a walk, which is all great because you're spending that time doing something physical. But also the magic of audiobooks is that you can kind of sit around and listen and feel so engulfed in stories, right? Or you just curl up on the couch and actually just spend a few hours listening, reading, and not realize that so much time has passed, you know, sitting on the bus, sitting on the train. How much time do we spend as low vision people commuting? And we can spend all that time listening to audiobooks. I look forward to those hours.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk a bit about the kind of books that you listen to. Do you take recommendations from people? Do you kind of go anywhere and everywhere with your reading habits, or do you particularly like books, certain kinds of books?
As y'all know, I'm a very social person. Y'all know that. So even with myself, is I love recommendations from others because when it's a recommendation from another person, I feel like, yes, I just finished that book. Where's that person? So we could discuss it and be like, did you believe that that person did that to that person? And can you believe that that happened to that person? So it's really cool to kind of get those recommendations. So even with yourself, Ramya, you have given me a couple of recommendations, and I really enjoyed the ones that you have given me. And And Nazreem, I know I'm going to be knocking at your door looking for some recommendations.
She's looking for recommendations too.
Waiting for it.
Yeah, oh, of course, of course. I don't know if y'all will like my style book, but like I'm just so excited about those recommendations. And even for myself personally, I like to delve into everything. Like I love the self-help books. I love the kind of murder mystery books.
Mm-hmm.
At
Also,
one
you
point
might
I
like
even
Till Death Do Us Part by Amanda Quick that Nazreen had to put away and I finished, but I sped read it.
Good luck, man.
look at that.
Good
Maybe
luck.
is it what 1,000 hours? Is it 1,000 hours?
No, it's
not,
quite
it's
short.
not that long. But it feels long.
Yeah.
Definitely. Like just give me anything. I just want to know. Like I'm a person who yearns for learning. So any book, I know I'm gonna go off the record, and I know this is going to be aired, but I will give a little guilty pleasure. I did read The Hunger Games and thoroughly enjoyed that,
Sweet.
and even like it's a genre called like hood drama. That's another guilty pleasure, but hood drama is something that's just really cool, and it's almost like watching a movie of New Jack City or watching
Wow.
just like those movies, right? So give me anything and
Really?
I will enjoy it.
Okay, so why do you consider, and this is a kind of a cool thread for me, why do you consider certain kind of books guilty pleasures? Is it that you wouldn't really talk about it, but you love, binging through them, or what is it? Because I hesitate to say yet again on the show that I reread Harry Potter over and over and over and over again, and it's kind of my go to sleep type book, or curled up and want to get something familiar read type of book. But I don't hesitate to tell people, but maybe that's my version of a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, so just even for me and for people who kind of know me, the personality I have, it's a guilty pleasure because people don't really expect you to delve into that book, especially with me. And I mean, I know I'm going to get booted off of this podcast, but even with me and Harry Potter, I'm always
Yeah,
be like, who's reading Harry Potter? Like,
we
you
tried.
must have to be above whatever to read
We
below,
tried
blah
with
blah
him.
blah. I'm a lost cause, but it's almost where because people know your personality, they don't expect you to go into those realms of books. But even as I mentioned before, I just love learning perspectives, and I just love learning a different world. And I look at books as stepping into different universes. If it was up to me, I'd step into like every kind of universe and just like observe. So I would say that's a guilty pleasure, kind of with the personality that you bring, and then a book being so out of your elements. Like if you apply it to music, I'm a hip hop guy. Can you imagine me be like, I'm gonna pump some Brook and all that stuff, right? It's just what people don't expect, which that's where I kind of come off with audiobooks.
Yeah, I think that you mentioning that people kind of have maybe not expectations, that might be a little harsh, but they have thoughts of what you may enjoy reading based on your personality or the way that you carry yourself. And then for you to say, well, one of my guilty pleasures is hood dramas, and then they say what. I think that that's a real interesting concept, right? Because people have they've pegged you as or you assume that they've pegged you as a certain kind of reader. But I think that's one of the cool things about getting into book listening in the first place, which is that you can go anywhere with books, and books that may seem on the surface a certain way, or you might think, yeah, I don't think I'm into this because it's fantasy. And then you get into it because of something else that's drawn you in, like the character development, or the fact that it was written in a certain city and you're just so fascinated by what was brought out, and all these kind of things to bring us into what to why we love that book and fall in love with it, and then go and end up recommending it to others, aka go read Harry Potter. All that to say, go read Harry Potter. It's incredible talking to you today on AMI Audiobook Review, and we've totally run out of time, but thank you so much for joining us, and I'm sure we'll have you back on again to get some recommendations from you.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. And it will be a pleasure. It will be an honor to come back and talk some audiobooks once again.
Bernard Akuoko joining us. And that's a wrap for this week. Nisreen Abdelmajid and myself, Ramya Amuddin, will be back next week for more audiobook chat. In the meantime, happy audiobook listening.
This was an AMI podcast. For more accessible media, visit ami.ca.